Today in Washington, something was happening that people were only whispering about yesterday. Congress. They didn't invite an ordinary official or just another witness, but the person testifying under oath was someone who tried to do the impossible, to imprison Donald Trump, but thank God he failed. His name is Jack Smith. Jack, the former special prosecutor of the United States Department of Justice, who was assigned the two most explosive and underhanded missions of the Biden era, the case about the allegedly stolen secret documents by Trump, and the case about Trump's alleged conspiracy. January 6th. Today, everything has turned upside down. Today, the hunter has become the prey. The man who spent years accusing others has now found himself in the position of the accused, even if there are no official charges yet. But he is being questioned by congressmen, including those whose phones he personally ordered to be tapped, whose messages he studied, whose contacts he tried to uncover on their phones. Both from my perspective and theirs, these investigations were totally illegal. In this video, we'll find out who Jack Smith is really, why the Biden administration chose him specifically, which cases he initiated, how his attempts ended, and how he behaved with those he interrogated, what violations he is being accused of today, and why. BR warned that there were no grounds for a raid on Mar-a-Lago, but he gave the order and instructed them after entering Trump's house. If necessary, can you shoot anyone, including Melania? And in the end, we'll tackle the main question. Did Jack Smith serve the law, or did he serve anyone who would advance his career and pay him more money? And as for the oath, conscience, honor, well, obviously he doesn't care about those. In the photo, he looks like any official. Gray suit, reserved expression. But behind this outward dullness is the career of a man who has spent his whole life specializing in dirty work, specifically against politicians. Jack Smith worked at the United States Department of Justice and at one point headed the Anti-Corruption Division. This is exactly the department that handles criminal cases against congressmen, governors, senators, and others, but usually from the president's opposition party. He led high-profile cases. Former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, Congressman Rick Renzi, New York Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, former presidential candidate John Edwards. Some of these cases ended in convictions, but later some of the guilty verdicts were overturned by the Supreme Court in the case of Bob McDonnell. And there was a unanimous, which is very rare, decision by the Supreme Court that actually called into question the methods of Smith and his team. Anyone else would have been kicked out into oblivion, but Smith was needed like a guard dog. Simply say attack and point at the target. Before his appointment, McDonnell, the special prosecutor for Trump, worked in The Hague, investigating war crimes in Kosovo. And so in November 2022, 3 days after Donald Trump announced his new presidential campaign, 3 days, Attorney General Merrick Garland appoints Jack Smith as special prosecutor for the Trump cases. They hardly had time to breathe and were terrified. The official version is that this is an independent prosecutor. He's above politics. Of course, he's above politics. He'll stand wherever he's told to stand. And as for being independent, the question is independent from whom or from what, because it seems he doesn't depend on the law at all. To understand why the White House under Biden and the Justice Department leadership chose this particular person, you need to look at the tasks they set for him. First, there were two strategic directions of attack against Trump: the alleged illegal retention of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago and the alleged conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 election. In 2024, Trump was running for power again. And any criminal case could alter the election outcome. Well, it could influence donors, elites, the media, the masses, anyone. For such a task, they needed someone who, well, how should I put it, isn't afraid to work in the gray area of the law and at the same time be formally protected by the status of an independent fighter for justice against corruption. Jack Smith was a perfect fit for this role. A career prosecutor with a reputation for being tough, unemotional, and absolutely unscrupulous in carrying out his duties. Officially, Garland, the United States Attorney General, spoke of him as someone who would follow only the facts and the law, but today in Congress, he is being asked whether he actually followed the facts, when the FBI itself admitted there was no reason for a raid on Mar-a-Lago, the president's residence. On August 8, 2022, federal FBI agents conducted a search at Donald Trump's residence, Mar-a-Lago, in Florida. It was an unprecedented step in United States history. For the first time, the home of a former president was visited by, well, police, the FBI, it doesn't matter, and the home. It was searched as part of a criminal case. The investigation of this episode ended up with Jack Smith. He charged Trump with dozens of criminal counts related to storing classified documents, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. Photos from the case materials showed boxes of documents piled up in a storage room next to Trump's personal belongings. This was used in the media as visual evidence of the former president's complete irresponsibility. But by 2025, documents emerged that completely changed the picture. Senator Chuck Grassley publishes correspondence showing that FBI employees had warned the Justice Department in advance that they did not see sufficient grounds, what's called probable cause, for such a harsh raid. In other words, those who were supposed to carry out the raid said the legal basis was insufficient. It's completely unclear what we're doing when we break into the home of a former United States president. But the special prosecutors still went ahead with the forceful action. But that's not enough. Smith, as it turned out, was actually appointed to the position illegally. Federal Judge Aileen Cannon ruled Jack Smith's appointment illegal and closed the documents case. Because the people who were doing all this had no right to do any of it. Smith had another case related to the events of January 6, 2021. Everyone who worked with him knew they were lying, that they were falsifying things, but their careers and their earnings outweighed everything else. And every single one of them broke the law in the most vile and despicable way. Here, Smith built the prosecution's case as follows. Trump allegedly prepared the ground in advance to refuse to recognize the election results, and then resorted to crimes to hold on to power. In one of the key documents, Smith's team writes, Trump resorted to crimes in an attempt to stay in power after losing a direct accusation against the former president of deliberately undermining the constitutional process. Smith came up with a catchy phrase. The common thread in Trump's behavior was lying. It sounds good. The common thread in Trump's behavior was lying, and it was through lies that Trump incited his supporters. The case was supposed to be, of course, the legal endpoint of the entire January 6th story and the end of Trump's career. It didn't happen. It fell through. After Trump's return to the White House in 2025, both cases, the one about the documents and the one about January 6th, were dropped, and Meduse, citing politics, refused to continue prosecuting the sitting president. From a hero promising the world, he became Smith the criminal, who, on orders from the Democratic Party's criminal gang, fabricated cases and tried to slander people. Jack Smith has a reputation as someone who isn't afraid to squeeze and pressure people. Both his former colleagues and lawyers who have dealt with his cases give him this description. They say he's tough. In cases against politicians, he often used an aggressive strategy, the widest possible range of charges, broad interpretations of the law. In other words, he would come up with ways to twist it. Pressure on the suspect's associates to get deals and testimony. This is exactly the style we saw in the cases against Trump. Expanded charges, an attempt to show not just a single episode, but an overall criminal scheme, with Trump as the mastermind and organizer. And this knowing that all of it, absolutely all of it, is a lie. In his public statements, Smith spoke not as a lawyer, but as a political moral accuser. In fact, that's exactly why he was brought in, to denounce. If he didn't imprison, he tarnished. That was enough for them too, but as we know, it turned out to be not enough. After one of the indictments, he stated, "The attack on the Capitol was an unprecedented assault on our democracy. That's not the prosecutor's role. That's not the prosecutor's job to do that." Everything he did was steeped in lies. This is a continuation of Smith's and his clients' lies. Today, many congressmen, especially Republicans, don't see a prosecutor in this. They don't see a law-abiding prosecutor, but a political player who has already drawn his own conclusions long ago and manipulates the facts. Not even to fit his own beliefs, but to fit what his superiors have told him. Whoever buys her dinner gets to dance with her. Now to one of the most dramatic episodes in the entire history of Mar-a-Lago, the raid on Mar-a-Lago. For Trump's supporters, this wasn't an investigative action, but a show of force. The state, controlled by his political opponent, comes to the former president's home armed and with orders to shoot if necessary. According to information that is now available to the Senate and Congress, there was no unity within the FBI. The leak included letters and messages where employees openly said, "We don't see any new facts. We don't understand. We don't understand what's going on at all. We don't understand what the matter is." And yet the order to go to Mar-a-Lago at night, and the order to pursue, and the order to lie was given. The gates of Mar-a-Lago opened. The agents entered the premises, inspecting bedrooms, storage rooms, and warehouses. Later, the case files would include photos of fallen boxes of classified documents mixed with personal belongings. From the recently published information, it turns out that this is all nonsense. They scattered all the documents themselves, then photographed them, and even put labels like secret and top secret on some of them themselves. For your eyes only. For critics, this is the main proof of the political nature of the case. When the law says, wait, there isn't enough reason, but political will says, go ahead. Trump called this a criminal raid that should never have happened in America. His public statements and posts became part of the narrative about the deep state, which uses law enforcement against the opposition. And now we move to today, after 2 years of investigations, indictments, statements, raids. After the cases against Trump had already been closed, Jack Smith himself ends up in the witness chair, for now as a witness. He comes to hearings in the House of Representatives, which is controlled by the Republicans, and tries to defend what he did, claiming that his decisions were based solely on facts and the law, and that there was absolutely no political motivation in his actions. At the same time, the congressmen rely on new documents, FBI correspondence about doubts regarding the legal basis of the raid, court decisions that question the very legality of his appointment, and statistics from his previous cases, some of which were completely overturned when they reached a higher court, such as the Supreme Court. For supporters of Trump, these hearings are a chance to show that the law was used as a weapon against a political opponent. For the Democrats, an attempt to present Smith as an honest prosecutor who was simply doing his job and has now become the target of revenge. The story of Jock Smith is not just the biography of one prosecutor. It's a reflection of what American politics has become when criminal prosecution turns into an extension of electoral struggle. At first, he was appointed as the person who was supposed to stop Trump, but then his cases either collapsed in court or were halted. Today, he sits before those whose phones were checked, whose conversations were recorded and analyzed, whose correspondence he pulled out. So, if the FBI warned that there were no grounds for the raid, if the courts are questioning his authority, if the criminal prosecution of the former president coincides with his election campaign, is this the mistake of a single prosecutor, or is it a system that allows the law to be turned into a weapon? Write in the comments whether you consider Jack Smith an honest prosecutor or a political appointee assigned for a single purpose. Yes, to take down Trump. And share this video with those who still believe that the law in America is above politics. Please share. Goodbye.